guys, happy whatever day it is that you're listening to this episode, but I have an amazing guest in store for you. Her name is Tasha Saunders, and she is a player care specialist for this company called OnRise. And it is a fascinating interview where she talks a little bit about what got her into this organization and what they do. But basically, it's this program that assists athletes both in their careers and as they're transitioning out of their careers to kind of give them the tools that they need to stick it out, feel good about themselves, fix everything that's going on internally, emotionally, and how that applies to pretty much every aspect of your life. The company is fantastic. They're doing such amazing things. They're growing so much. I actually met Tasha at a Soccer X event down in Miami where she was talking to me a little bit about what she does with OnRise, and I just felt like whenever I had decided to start this podcast that she needed to be a guest. We needed to get the word out about OnRise, and I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that this leads to more opportunities for OnRise, and if you're a therapist and this sounds exciting and you want to help other athletes do the same thing, I mean, we have a call to action at the end, how you can get involved, but yeah, enjoy the episode. It was really fun, and I enjoyed talking to Tasha, and I hope you will too.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Where in the world are you right now?
So I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, where are you?
I'm in Atlanta.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, not in Miami.
I know. It's so funny because like every time I tell Blaze or anyone about how we met, I'm like, yeah, we kind of just met at the Soccer X thing and we connected right away and I was fascinated by her story. So
That's awesome. I love that.
I'm glad we got to do this. First, I definitely want to start with a little bit of your own background.
Yeah.
Like, so how did you get involved with what you're doing now? What got you inspired to do it? I know that you were a former athlete, so I kind of just want like a brief rundown of what OnRise is, what you're doing, and how you got to that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a story, but I think it's important in how it came to fruition, especially when talking about startups as well. Like startups, the idea we're trying to create something that's not there, not being used well enough, or we need more of. And so really my background as an athlete, I've been obsessed with sports for forever. Like I always was playing soccer from a young age. You're supposed to be 4 years old to play, and my mom faked my birthday on the sign up so I could play when I was 3 because I wouldn't stop bugging her about like, I want to play. So I've always been obsessed with it. And I think like an important part of the story and kind of what brings me to where I am now and how I got involved with OnRise as well, is going through the college process of looking to play a sport in college. So soccer was my sport, and my parents are from England, and so they didn't really have a very good understanding of what it's like to go through the college process in America. And I'd ask them, what are good colleges? Like, how do I start this? Can I even play in college? Am I good enough? And going through that process, I started to follow in some footsteps of some other athletes I knew who had played at certain organizations. And one of them was High Point University. So that was one of the few like D1 schools I was seriously considering. And really just because I think I was lacking a little bit of confidence in that area. And I knew, okay, well, if somebody I knew thinks I'm good enough to play there, maybe I'll push to go play there. So I went for a tryout and played really well. I remember I was a sophomore in high school at this point in time. And I remember some of the girls who were currently on the team, they told me, they're like, don't worry, like you're not in this scrimmage right now because really we're trying to see what the juniors and seniors could kind of bring to the table. Like give it another year and I promise you'll be part of this. Like you did an amazing job. I think also part of the important part of the story too is between that tryout and my next time that I came back to High Point, my parents got a divorce. And, you
Mm.
know, I'm 16, 17, and throughout this process, I'm kind of like, yeah, maybe it's not affecting me. Maybe it's affecting me. And in hindsight, it was very much affecting me. I remember after my second tryout at High Point, and I think it's really important sometimes to share this story, especially with current athletes and especially with teenagers too, because a lot of times when people reach out to mental health, they root it in their performance of I want to be better at my sport. And we know at On Horizon that if you take care of your things off of the field, you're able to focus on the field. So my
Mm.
second tryout comes along, and the coach says to me, he's like, I don't I don't know what happened, but like we're no longer interested. Yeah. And so, you know, at the time I was kind of trying to understand this and reconcile like what I was going through. And I think that in that moment, I was kind of okay with it. I really decided that I wanted to play every minute of every game. And for me, that meant I wanted to go D3. Um, but really, like in that moment, I wasn't thinking, oh, well, this happened, right? I wasn't able to say, I can tell you what happened. But in hindsight, like as an adult now, I can say I know exactly what happened and why I went so far and downhill and did not show up to that tryout in the way I needed to. And it was because I wasn't right. Like I wasn't all there. I was struggling with so much that was leading to depression and anxiety and things I didn't know how to put into words as a 16-year-old. I mean, you feel very old at the time, but you're not like you're
Well, even now, as an adult,
Mhm.
sometimes putting those things, like putting a name to what we're feeling, is a lot more challenging than we expect.
Absolutely. So I ended up going to Swanee, the University of the South. It's in Tennessee as well, or where I'm from in Tennessee. And I went and I played and I started, and I mean, it was everything I could have wished for. I also think, like, in playing D3, I was able to form more than just like one side of myself. And I know some people have that experience when they do go D1, but like a lot of your time is consumed by your sport when you play at such a high level. And in playing D3, you know, we had an off season and I was able to like explore sorority life or like whatever I really wanted to do at that point in time. And I think that really helped like formulate my personality and myself as more than just an athlete, which in the end was really going to help me out. Right. Um, so, you know, senior year comes around and transparently, like I ended up tearing and like tweaking my ankles like 14 probably times. And I've had
Oh,
surgeries on
Jesus.
different things, but not my ankles. And yeah, and so I couldn't really play anymore unless I was getting support taped, like that kind of thing. Um, and so really, I feel like when I graduated college and I stopped playing, it was almost like getting a divorce from the sport. I was like, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to, you know, be involved in it. I don't want to watch the news about it. Like, I want nothing to
Mm.
do with soccer because I feel like I can't play. Like, I'm done and I'm separating myself from it. So I think like probably 4 or 5 years go by, and I jump into teaching in a roundabout way. And as athletes, as I can encourage anybody for this, that they are the best people to hire. Like athletes work so hard and will go all in on any project that you want them to. I can't I can't speak highly enough about hiring athletes and on
Oh, well,
ice.
they have that winner's
We do
mentality. So,
totally, totally. And like wanting to be the best and like integrating
hmm,
feedback and working harder and showing up every day. And those are all like transferable skills that we talk to our current athletes about when they say, all I've ever done is play a sport. We go, okay, well, did you show up every day? Did you show up on time every day? Like, what would your coach say about your work ethic? Those are all things that are very transferable in the workplace. Were you a leader on the field? Like, how was your communication style? Those are all very transferable things into the workplace, right? Um, so yeah, so it had been about 5 years. I was teaching and went all in on it. I was like wanting to be the best of the best. And I get a phone call from Dr. Kimberly Quigley, and she was a family friend of mine growing up too. She calls me and she's like, have you heard of the USL? I was like, honestly, Kim, I haven't even started like following soccer at all. Like, what's up? This is post COVID, and Kim's one of those amazing entrepreneurs that when she gets an idea, and my mom's really good friends with her as well, she goes and she does it. And
We love women like
we
that.
do, we do. I call my mom too, and I'm like, what do you think? And she goes,
So is this the beginning of On
this is the
Rise then?
start.
Like
This
she
is the very
Okay.
start of everything.
Okay.
So yeah. So she calls me and she throws out this idea. Leave Denver, come back to Knoxville, Tennessee. We're going to do this thing. I know it sounds wild, but try it with me for the summer. If you don't like it, like, you can quit. And I'm like, leave Denver. Go
How do you
to
say no?
Knoxville, live with my mom. Like, all of these things I'm kind of processing, like, leave this stable job to go pursue this wild dream. And I call my mom and I'm like, what do we think? Blah, blah, blah. My mom says, I've never seen Kim put her mind to something that she doesn't achieve. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's go do it. So we show up. We were working with One Knox SC. So they were originally a USL2 team. So that's semi-professional.
Wait. First, really quick, just for the listeners who don't know what On Rise is.
Yeah.
So what is On Rise? And then we can get into what you guys started doing.
So at this point in time, On Rise was passing out bananas. On Rise was showing up to every single practice. On Rise was taking the USL2 semi-professional athletes to doctor's appointments and making sure that they had resources in their community and making sure they had people who just cared for them and they were there for them, right? So these are like the starting seeds of how can we care about these athletes as more than just athletes, as people. Fast forward to where On Rise is now. On Rise is a telehealth compassionate company. We hire former athletes, at least professional at least college, if not professional athletes, who we train through rigorous mental health training to essentially be peer-to-peer counselors. So there's somebody who's been through it like myself. They can see the perspective, zoom out, and be relatable and understand what these current athletes are going through. We're accessible, we're telehealth. We also kind of break down a lot of that stigma too. You're meeting with another current athlete who's willing to talk to you about your mental health, right?
I think that's a really big one too. Because I feel like, especially just generationally, the stigma of mental health has been so many different things over the past few years. And I feel like even now that it is so common, it still becomes this issue of like, well, I'm tough enough. I don't need it. So especially I think in the sports world, when we were talking, and I brought up the example of seeing it in Ted Lasso. Obviously in Ted Lasso, it was in person, not just telehealth, but you really get to understand that people are very hesitant to doing it.
Yeah.
And it takes sometimes someone who's been through it and understands to kind of pull you guys out. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I think Ted needed to see that in the psychiatrist too. Like he kept wanting to know more about her life because he was like, how do I relate to you? How do I understand you so that I can open up more? And I love that about our model too. As peer-to-peer counselors, we can share a little bit more about our lives. Obviously there's a line. And also, like, we were athletes too. And I can say, yeah, I've been through a similar experience. Here's how I dealt with it, right? So we take these former athletes, train them, and utilize them in a telehealth capacity to meet with current athletes. And like I said, there's a few like really magical, amazing things in that model right there. But also what we offer is having a therapist as backup, having a psychiatrist as backup as well. And we meet weekly and do continuing education with they're called athlete mental health specialists who we train. And really like having that backing of, am I on the right track talking to this person about this? And surprisingly, like the relatability and the stigma and the access and the cost, like we overcome a lot / all of that when they meet with us through On Rise. And also we have that backing from the therapists that we know that we're on the right track. And the sports connection is what opens the door. But what really keeps us in the door is just being able to give them those strategies to keep on keeping on. And like I said, like, yeah, that's the relatability that opens the door. But what keeps us is being able to open that up so that they stay. And 90% of the time, we don't even talk about sports, right? It's other things. And sometimes at the end of it, when they say, oh, this really sucked and this happened this week and it has to do with my practice or whatever, there's the relatability where you can start talking about the sports. But it's really about like opening that door.
Do you guys concentrate more on athletes as they're in the sport, in their careers, or is there a large focus on the transition from being an athlete your whole life to now, okay, what do I do next? Whether it's from aging out, an injury, or just whatever it is, whether it's, okay, I'm done at the college level, what's next?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that you guys focus on? Or is it just all of it?
Yeah. So our chief athletic officer, Derek Furlow, he always says, you know, you're going to leave sports at some point by choice or by force, right? Is it an injury? Is it that you're just ready to be done? Is it age? There's a lot of things. Do you not make the team anymore? There's a lot of different things that we talk to them about. Transitioning is a huge part of that. And we have different contracts with different organizations that definitely hit that. And we see that as a really big mental health focus. And there are people out there that specialize in transitioning out as an athlete. I think that's such a big focus, and similar to why you're doing this podcast too, right? Because, and I mentioned it in talking about D3 soccer, like soccer wasn't my whole personality when I started to go through college, which was really nice for me. For some people it is. And when you lose that by choice or by force, you feel like you're just treading water. You're out in the middle. You're lost. You don't know how to root your identity again. Your whole identity was this thing that you can no longer do. Or you're no longer been asked to do, or it's not providing for you anymore. And that's a huge part of some of our contracts that we talk to different athletes about. So we are currently contracted with the MLS Players Association, and they're contracting us to work with former players. So a lot of them who are still going through these things that you were very few professions. Do you become a professional at something and then stop and start all the way over again, right? Military can be one of those, but also sports is kind of the other one. Becoming a professional and then starting again and really seeing the value in yourself that you didn't just play a sport. You played professionally for 7 years. And what did that give you? What life skills did that give you that you can bring over into the workplace? And I really do think that more increasingly, like, different employers aren't just looking for the different marks on your resume of graduating in 5 years at this level, right? Like, how did you show leadership? How did you show up? How did you provide for your community and give back? Like, all of those things, people really are looking for that in different athletes and bringing them into their space through that transition process. So a lot of faith in themselves.
Well, I think it even takes work to get to that point, at least for me personally, and I'm not an athlete, so this is a very different example, but it took a minute to even feel like I want to do something, or I'm able to do something that's not production, right? Yep. Because in my head, I'm like, this is it. I don't want to do anything else but this. My skills are honed into that. I don't want to go outside of it. And then finally, when I started peeling back the layers of the onion, I'm like, you know what? I am a good leader. I am very efficient. I love looking at like whatever and then seeing what other jobs those skills fit into. And then I started joining groups on Facebook for marketing and communications, which is technically what I studied in college as my backup. Yeah. And like talking to people in those groups were like, oh, we love hiring former producers because they bring X, Y, and Z. Yep. And I feel like with big life transitions, when you're kind of forced to do something else, it takes a minute to get there. But when you get there, it's almost like a second wind. Yes. There's this book called The Second Mountain, which I haven't read yet and everyone keeps recommending, but it's kind of that same idea of like when you reach the first mountaintop that you've been dreaming of getting to and you make it, like what the hell do you do now?
Absolutely.
Now it's about, okay, well, it's not over. There's
Yeah.
this whole other world that you can start working towards
Yeah.
and stuff. And I love that you guys are dedicated to that and helping
Absolutely.
people or giving them the tools to, you know, get to that place and open their minds and feel useful again. Because that was, I mean, me personally, I was so depressed. I didn't know what was going to happen, or
Yeah.
it took a minute to get there.
Yeah.
But
And uncertainty too, right? And it's
oh yeah,
it's not only, like you said, it's not only it's believing it in yourself too, that I am capable of those things. I can climb a different mountain and a new mountain. It's not just that there's one mountain or one option. And I think you definitely alluded to this, but when we talk to athletes, when their entire identity is wrapped up in their sport, all right, we've got some more work to do, right? And how do you start laying the foundation for other things, to be more than just soccer, just football, just lacrosse, whatever it is, or whatever sport it is. And when I talk to some athletes who are starting to go through this transition and they're like, oh no, I see myself as way more than an athlete. I see myself as a mother. I see myself as a producer, or I have all these different hobbies and things, like that helps our conversation a lot. But then there's also those additional things of anxiety and uncertainty about the future and some depression that comes along with it, right? People who have time to go through that process of understanding and knowing that they're going to leave their sport can go through the process of anticipatory grief, right? They're starting to think through, okay, what's next? What seeds can I lay? They're not being forced out of, wow, I've just had my third ACL tear and now I'm done, right? I haven't been planting seeds along the way. But they've been taking that time before to kind of grieve through this process. And then when it comes, it doesn't hurt as bad. It's not just pulled out from underneath you. So yeah, really laying that work and doing that foundational stuff. And I talk to a lot of athletes who are like, I don't know if it's this year, but it might be next. And I feel like I want to start talking to somebody about it. So
what's the difference that you've seen in athletes that they see that finish line getting closer and closer versus the ones that are forced out? Or what are some of the similarities and some of the differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. Trying not to think about like a really sad metaphor for this, but you know, it's the idea of a shock of grief happening to you versus, like I said, pre-planning, anticipatory grief, going through some of those grieving phases before. Like you are losing something that's a big part of your identity. Whether it's that your body just can't do it anymore, or you're not able to provide for your family on the salary that you're making, whatever it might be, and you're starting to understand these things, you're having little moments and little daily encounters of that's coming, right? And when you have an injury, it's, like I said, swept out from underneath you of, oh my gosh, all at once. And I think that's really where people start almost catastrophizing and like snowballing and making it bigger, right? And instead of pausing, taking a step back and being able to do that, because their whole life, their whole identity, everything's wrapped up in it. And I really think having us as a resource and being able to share and talk to somebody, especially being able to talk to somebody who's been through it too. And we do try and really intentionally pair athletes with athlete mental health specialists. So let's say they sign up and they say, I've just had another ACL tear. I think this is going to be it for me. We're going to try and pair them with somebody who did have a career-ending injury. And they can just be there for them of, hey, this is what worked for me. Here's a strategy. Give it a try. If it doesn't, let's come up with another strategy. So
I love that. Wow. Do you guys are you only working with soccer players, or do you do other sports as well?
We are open to any sport. So definitely putting some feelers out there. I've made a big push. I would love to see rugby. We've gotten a lot of different interest from a lot of different clubs and players associations. So not gender specific, not sports specific. And we've really found that a lot of athletes enjoy talking to other former athletes, our current athlete mental health specialists, that did play a different sport. They're able to
Oh,
explain
interesting.
like this happened and this is why it matters. Like you get it because you're
Mm.
competitive and you played this other sport, but let me tell you why it's a big deal in volleyball or whatever it might be. They kind of enjoy that part too.
Yeah, no, my next question was good because I'm genuinely curious of like if you're seeing a difference between volleyball players versus rugby players
Mm.
versus footballers versus soccer players, like what like does any particular group seem to have a stronger characteristic or anything that helps that you can see is beneficial for the volleyball player that they seem to be lacking? I
Yeah.
don't know, just curious about
Yeah, I think it's less like
anything
by
there.
sport and more by like components of demographics, right? So like
Mm.
there's stigma around men reaching out or whatever it might be. Like, so gender might be part of it. It could be age of I'm 30. I don't really care if anybody knows that I'm getting support. You talked about this in walking to the therapist's office in Ted Lasso. One of the things that we take out is by having telehealth, you can have a call with us in your hotel. Or if you want and you really don't care, they can have a telehealth appointment with us in the back of the bus on the way to their trip. Some of the players that we talk to don't care that other people know that they're getting support. And I do think one of the biggest components and pieces of uh, being able to get more utilization out of the organizations that use us is that word of mouth piece of, oh my gosh, you should totally try On Rise, right? Um, and that's a huge component of the athletes actually reaching out and using us. So,
So it sounds like On Rise is kind of like the connector of people, right? Of like finding the right therapist to for that client or that footballer or whatever it
yeah,
is, that athlete.
yeah.
I love that. I love that your boss came up with this. Like what do you know what inspired her to do it?
Yeah. So she really just started seeing some pretty elite athletes and coaches and different just higher up, like well-known athletes who were pretty sick. And she's like, why are they coming to me, a psychiatrist, and they're kind of like this far along being sick? Why isn't there a way for us to kind of catch this earlier? And I mean, we could go really into this, but healthcare, especially mental health care, there's a lot of setbacks. And one of the things is being able to reach out to somebody and try somebody within a good time frame. Like anybody that's partnered with us, we'll see them within 48 hours. That's the first part is you can talk to somebody today or tomorrow, right? It's not I'm going to sit on this and now a month's gone by. I don't even really know
Wait
if I want to talk
forever.
to somebody. So that's kind
Yeah.
of the first part. The second part is it expands a reach. Not everybody can go and see a psychiatrist. So you're expanding a reach, you're taking the cost down by them being able to talk to a peer to peer support counselor and somebody who's relatable. And 85% of this is just having somebody who's there for you, actively listening, able to say, I get it. And that sucks. That's really hard. So really like being able to expand this reach, and we've seen so many of these athletes go through a huge change in feelings of anxiety, feelings of depression. It's like 46% of them, like a 46% increase in
Wow.
feeling better. If you package that and put that in a pill, people would take it tomorrow, right?
Oh, 100%.
But sometimes just putting in the work and it's having these conversations and knowing that somebody's there for you. So really like when she started it, she's like, how can I expand my reach? Like Dr. Kim Quigley cannot see every athlete when they are sick and they're this far sick. How can we put preventative things in place instead of becoming reactive to these situations? And so that's really where she's like, let's expand reach. Let's make them relatable. Let's make them look like them, sound like them, speak their language, right? Literally like a different language versus like soccer, sports, cross, whatever it might be
Yeah.
language
Yeah.
too.
I love that. I mean, one of the other freelance gigs that I'm working on, we work with different health companies or people that are making innovations in the health
Mm,
world, and one of the companies is called Meadows Health Institute, I think.
okay.
Anyway, they're based out of Texas, and one of their initiatives is creating this program for children to get mental health while they're at the pediatrician. So
Oh,
basically, when they're seeing
nice.
their pediatrician, there's I think it's a psychologist and then a moderator, I believe. I could be butchering this, so knock on wood, I gotta search it up. But it's so fascinating that they're doing this and they're spreading it all over Texas. And we did an interview with a family that has been benefiting from it. That I think he's 13 years old. He used to not have any dreams or goals or anything. And after talking to his therapist, now he's like, I want to be a graphic designer and I hope I can move to
Yeah.
Miami one day. And his grandmother, who's the one raising him, was like, I've never heard him talk like this. Like, we're so grateful for this because instead of going to the doctor and being recommended to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, like everything is done through Meadows there at the pediatrician.
Yeah.
They connect them with whoever they need to see and they do all the work for it.
Great.
And like you're saying, it's so difficult sometimes to just get connected to the right person or you have to wait forever. And then at that point, you're like,
Yep.
I'm fine. I don't need this.
And I think,
And with kids especially, I think it's like helping with that stigma too of like, it's fine. It's okay to get help. It's
yeah.
wonderful to understand your thoughts and your emotions.
I think also like being oriented in the future is so important too, when you're going through these transitions and stuff. My mom always said, like, take it 5 minutes at a time. And sometimes when I'm really not feeling well, I'm taking it 30 seconds at a time, right? But when you see a kid
Mm-hmm.
shift from I have no career, no goal, no ambition, and then all of a sudden they're like, I want to do this and I want to move to Miami and I want to become this person. Becoming future oriented is such a safety plan piece to have of, I'm thinking about my goals in the future. I care about my decisions today because they affect tomorrow. Like that's huge and a great win.
Oh yeah. And I'm also noticing too, just like in my own therapy sessions, about how being anxious prevents you from really being able to dream and plan for the future because you're just so worried about what could go wrong, what could happen, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And that's something both my boyfriend and I are working on of like not worrying about tomorrow, taking it day by day and just, seeing where it
Yeah.
goes and being happy and doing the best that we can.
I also think, anxiety can be a good thing too, right? At certain levels of it, right? Like the reason you're thinking about those things is because you care about having money tomorrow or you care about your
Yeah,
dreams
that's
tomorrow
true.
and who you are as a person, and making sure that these things that you're taking on are impactful for you. Like it can be seen as beneficial sometimes with healthy levels of it, right? Like there's a reason we feel anxious in certain situations and um yeah, you're able to use that in healthy doses to, oh, like I'm actually thinking and planning for the future, which is so important. Like those are really good things to be anxious about, right?
Yeah, no, it is very true. Well, I'd love to know a little bit more about your personal experience with all of this. Like, what have you learned throughout the years being with OnRise that like has inspired you or changed your life or your perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's it's being there for the athletes. So my personal experience, like I was alluding to, when my parents got divorced, I ended up seeing a therapist and we weren't compatible, right? She was a very much older woman. Like I didn't feel like she understood me. Um, I feel like when we would get down to it and I would kind of start bringing up soccer and that I was depressed or down and I wasn't able to really play and I wasn't enjoying anymore, it was kind of this idea of like, just quit. And to me, I was like, this isn't working for me. I'm not doing this anymore. And I wasn't able to get that help. It just wasn't the right pairing for me, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think being able to just be there for these athletes and knowing that small conversations really help them, of them just being able to share something. Is it okay that I feel this way? 100% that's okay. Like different ways that we can support them and be there for them, um, and inspire them for the future. I think it's life saving, and we know that like having somebody who's there for you, having a mentor, having somebody you can look up to is suicide prevention. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and really just like having somebody relatable that you can reach out to who is there. I think that just keeps me going every day. And I've started to shift in over the 2 years into more of like, a customer success role. My current role, I'm our VP of operations. So I kind of do customer success and look over the athlete mental health specialists and help them with day-to-day things as well. It's always been really important to me that when I was our only employee of the player care side of things, when I was seeing all of those athletes, I had an amazing pulse of what was happening on the ground and what was making players anxious. What were they worried about? How can we better help them and change our model to meet their needs? And still to this day, I have my 5 athletes that I see every week, and they're on different levels of whether it's professional or academy athletes that I talk to, that I keep my pulse on what's happening on the ground so that I don't zoom out enough where I'm no longer understanding and relating and being able to be there for the things that they really need. So I think that's really important. And I'm not going to drop seeing those specific athletes because I think it's just really, really good to be on the ground and knowing what's going on.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of what brings you that joy and fulfillment, though, is like seeing the impact that your work is doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the themes that Blaze and I have been discussing too, because he's more of the instant gratification of he wants to see the results of his efforts, whereas I'm okay a little kind of like waiting it out and seeing the final picture, whether it's a month from now or whatever. And it's just interesting how each of us has a different kind of thing that brings us that joy and fulfillment. And it sounds like you being able to see the impact, be on the ground, know that, okay, this is what works, this is not working. Yeah. Let me change this, or let me, whatever. That's what brings you to life.
And like you said, the podcast is searching for success, right? It's the journey. It's not necessarily the destination. And we know that one day you might feel like you have mastery on one thing. Maybe it's just being resilient. That's what I was trying to say. So like one day you can show amazing resilience towards something. That's part of the journey, right? The next day, maybe it's not so easy for you. It doesn't mean just because you're able to show a characteristic of something that you've mastered resilience, right? You're going to have different challenges that you're going to come up along the way. It's the searching for success part. Like you don't just get success and then it's there. It's continuing to push forward.
Oh, 100%. When I was going through everything, a friend of mine who I hadn't really talked to too much, we had like a falling out for a little bit, and then she kind of came back into my life. And the one thing she told me was, remember that healing isn't linear. And she was obviously speaking about it specifically to the healing process of one day is great, the next day might not be so great, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
But I've been relating that to every single aspect of my life, where it's okay. Sometimes I'm going to feel on top of my game, and I'm going to be the best writer, producer, whatever it is that I need to be for that day. And maybe tomorrow it's probably a shittier version of myself, and that's okay too. It doesn't mean that I'm overall horrible or taking 7 steps back. It's just not a good day. And I don't know. It's something so cheesy and simple, but we all need to find our things that we can latch on to.
Absolutely. And if one thing works for you, and I've had different athletes, I think literally 9 out of 10 times I'll suggest a strategy, like this specific strategy, and they're like, wow, that was amazing and really helpful. I think I have one person that came back to me. He's like, no, that wasn't for me. That's fine. Let's find something else. Let's find something else that works for you. It's not, mental health isn't cookie cutter, right? Like what might work for you might not work for me.
No, that is true. Like there's so many tools, and we just sometimes what therapy is needed is to show you the different tools that you can kind of search through. And even the tool that might work for you today might not be the one that works tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a really stupid example, but I used to have a lisp growing up. I couldn't say sh, like the SH just was not, it wouldn't work. And I was in speech therapy for years. And I remember, I think I was in 7th grade, and she got this like sponge on a stick and she tickled the top of my mouth. And finally I was able to do the sh sound. And I was like, why didn't we try this before? We've tried all these other stupid things and that didn't work. And finally this is working. And I remember running straight like into my class and saying, guys, listen, shh.
That's so cute.
It's so stupid, but it is true. It's like there's a tool that might work today that didn't work before. I mean, maybe she had tried it before and and it finally clicked, but
Exactly.
yeah.
That's amazing. I love that story. I don't think it's a stupid example at all. I think it's
Oh,
great.
jeez. Sometimes I try to just erase from my memory that I had a list, but
It's the work.
it comes out sometimes even today.
That's
But
okay.
well,
I pronounce a lot of things differently because my parents are British, and sometimes people will be like, "What did you say?" And it's all good.
that's funny though because you don't have an accent at
Yeah, it
all.
doesn't sound like I'm from Tennessee though when you talk to somebody who's from Tennessee.
That's true too.
So yeah,
Are your parents still in Tennessee or are they overseas?
they are still in Tennessee. Yeah, but they moved here like
Nice.
I think 30 something years ago and never left. So yeah,
Oh, do they still have accents?
absolutely, absolutely. I do a lot of translating at restaurants for what they want to order, and especially in drive-through lines. But
That's always the best.
yeah, so and having these athlete mental health specialists that have been through what a lot of our current athletes are going through, the relatability to them, whether it's representation or speaking their language, um, creates this feeling of not feeling alone, which was something you talked about. Um, and it's a huge, huge personal thing for me is belonging. And one of the things I have been able to see as like one of my superpowers, and Derek Furlow Jr., who works for us too, he talks about in transitioning, like finding your superpower, and being able to use it in the next place or the next thing that you're doing. I always talk to some of our athletes that are going through the transition process, and I tell them, I say, listen, if you can find a job that hits everything that soccer hit for you, please let me know because I want to apply as well. But you're probably not going to find that, right? So like, what are the things that you love that your sport gives you that you need in your job? And if you aren't going to get that in your job, how else can you get that? So for me, one of my things is being competitive. Just played my first co-ed game 2 days ago. And I think I was playing at like
Ooh,
50% competitiveness, and I still was like, all right, I'm going to have to rein that in for next time because it was probably a little much. I'm like, referee. I'm like, okay, chill out, 7v7 co-ed, but here we are. But yeah, so finding those things that can be transferred over into your next workplace, and also figuring out like, what are your superpowers? What makes you you? What are things that if you didn't have them in your day-to-day routine, would you need to supplement them in by going and playing trivia at night so that when you play family board games that you're not getting in trouble and yelling at your mother-in-law, right? Like, how do you get that competitive nature out if your job isn't fulfilling those things for you anymore? And so, one of the things I see as one of my superpowers is the feeling of belonging. It's always something I've cared a lot about. I went to a Montessori school growing up, and a lot of kids who were there had some sort of need that, whether it was small or big. And honestly, I never really saw it growing up. I think like in hindsight and in reflection and in comparison to like public school world, I think probably a lot of us would have been on IEPs, which is like a special education, plan to get there, and just on minor stuff like that. But I really saw my educational needs that I went through growing up really met in that atmosphere and going to a Montessori school. But I think that they really made me feel that my things that other people would have seen as issues or whatever were superpowers. And I was able to cultivate that and bring that into high school and the real world with me. And one of the things I've always cared about is belonging and making other people feel like they belong, that they matter, that they're part of a bigger project. And it's silly, but like when we have friends over, I'm always that person that's like, oh my gosh, there's a chair missing. Like, how can I pull up something to where other people feel comfortable and everybody's included and they feel like they belong? Like, that is one of the things I've seen as my superpower. And I think in helping others transition from being an athlete to retiring or leaving that world, like helping them know that, like I said, not everything is just all I did was play this sport. You really are
Mm-hmm.
amazing, and you have these amazing abilities and qualities that you can bring into so many different spaces. And like I said, it might not all be ticked off by one job or one thing, but maybe you can supplement that feeling with volunteering or mentoring a younger person, whatever that might be. But really helping athletes know that they belong, they matter, that they're different parts of their personalities are superpowers, and helping them really believe that, because somebody can tell you that a million times, and until you see that in themselves, in yourself, and doing that work like you were talking about, of feelings of depression and anxiety, and you got to work through that stuff too. Your mom might sit there and tell you you're special, you're so smart, until you really believe that in yourself. Like, being able to transfer that into the next idea or opportunity,
Yeah.
like you've got to do work to really believe that. And I've done a lot with my athletes and helping them know that they belong, they matter, they really can do this. And just because you're climbing the next mountain, right, that you're gonna be able to do it, and it might not be the same as the first mountain that you conquered or you mastered, but you're going to be able to do it, and you have the skills to do it. It just might look a little different.
100%. And I absolutely love what your superpower is, because I think that is necessary in the work that you're doing. And I'm sure it's making an incredible impact on every life that you touch.
Thank you.
I mean, even with me when we met, it felt like, I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like you saw me and immediately were like, I want to make her feel comfortable here. And I felt like I was comfortable talking to you as if we had been friends forever, and like we both belonged exactly where we were, doing what we were doing.
And we probably shouldn't have been
I don't
standing
know.
where we were standing either. But thank you. That's
We
very
were too
kind.
close to the action.
No, thank you. That really means a lot. But I really do believe that in having some of these conversations, and sometimes athletes will reach out once, twice, and then I won't hear for them for 6 months, right? We know that talking about these things helps your performance overall, but we're not sports performance, which is a really big thing to point out too, because we do see a lot of athletes increase their performance on the field. Sometimes I'll watch a game, we don't know what he did, but really turning it around. And I was like, I'd like to take about
Well, it's like you said,
10%
like
of that.
if the inside is healthy, then the outside can be even healthier.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
You can see it. You're seeing it in the people that you're talking to and you're helping.
Absolutely. And just knowing that we're there for them is huge. It's huge.
Well, that was kind of like the point of this podcast too, is like, this is more for me, like my own therapy of like something that I love that I'm not getting to do right now is being able to interview people and learn their stories and share their stories. But so I just created this space to do that. And if it offers anyone anything, that's fantastic. But it's really just for me to get that fulfillment of talking to fascinating people like you. I mean, even though we got to talk for a little bit in Miami, but like I didn't get to hear enough about what you were doing because technically I was working and you were working. And
No,
but this is awesome. I really appreciate you talking to me.
absolutely. And you saying that just then too, of like, you said, belongingness and connecting and, being able to be there for other people to hear. And if they get anything out of it, then great, and that's kind of how we work too, of here's a few tools you can use, like we talked about, and here are some strategies. And I hope you get something out of this. And athletes don't come to us when they're super, super, super sick sometimes, but like for the most part, we're planting seeds and ways that we can be preventative instead of reactive and helping them. So like if somebody gets something out of your podcast that helps them move forward and you're able to get that for yourself, then it's a win overall, I think.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I was the first of my friend group to ever have gotten let go. So my friends were supportive, but no one really understood what I was going through. And my boyfriend Blaze, he had been let go before, but there's such a generational gap there, and we're just very different. Like very in tune with my emotions, and he's just starting that process. So it was very different. Like, he understood and he was there for me, but it wasn't that level of understanding. I don't even remember why I brought this
Well,
up.
when you're in tune with your emotions, that's your superpower, right? And you turned it into something that really affected you, and now you're producing it for other people so that they don't have to go through the same feelings or know that there's somebody
Yeah,
there
yeah.
for them.
You just hit the nail on the head. That exactly, like if I can just make one other person feel like it doesn't have to be so bad. Like, I went through the shit for you.
Yeah.
I was at the bottom of like I'm not gonna get out. I'm not gonna make
Right.
it, and here I am. And it was a long road. I mean, May 19th is gonna be a year.
Wow.
We're almost there. 3 days away from being a year. And I journaled today, and I was like, I'm so happy that I'm where I'm at now, because I didn't expect it.
Mm-hmm. And journaling is so important too, that you can look back on it on those important dates and be like, and I'm here now, right?
Oh my gosh. I've been like one of those addictive journaling people like since I was 6 or 7. I have journals that have maybe 4 pages written on them, but
Yep.
that was my thing growing up. And if I have a good day and I don't write about it, I'm like, where's my pen? I need to write this down. I need to remember this. So when I'm 75 and I've lost my mind, someone can read this to me and be like, remember the day?
Remember that day. So have you ever reread your journals though?
I have. Honestly, the only time I did it was for so the week that I met my boyfriend, we couldn't date. Like, I didn't know anything was going to happen, but I journaled about him. I'm like, I want to meet someone just like him.
That's amazing. You manifested.
And so, like, after we got together, I was like reading him some of the journal entries to be like, look, I was into you before you even had any idea. And I didn't even know I liked you. I just kind of like saw things in you.
Yeah.
And so that was fun. That's the only time I reread it, besides like the stupid things of I'm mad at my friend.
Yeah. from like middle school. Yeah, I think that's so important, because it's just you want to get things out and like write things down, and it's non-judgmental, and it's not really to go back and reread. It's just for you.
Exactly.
Like, it's good. Journaling. So
Definitely. Do you journal? Are you a journaler?
In different ways. Art mostly. I love watercolor and color pencils, and seeing the progression of my art over time. I've done some like writing, but honestly, the only way I've been able to keep like a real journal, and I throw this out to some of my athletes too as a strategy, is working back to front in the journal. So instead of going from left to right like we usually do, starting at the back, and when I do that, I'm able to see it as like less like progress of I've filled up this much of the journal, or I've journaled X amount of days in a row, because we don't really think about books like that way of I've read this much of it. It's like the back to front way, where it's just to journal. It's not really about completing it or doing it every night. It's just to be able to do it.
Yeah, I've never felt that pressure to do it every night. I wish I could draw, because I feel like that is... I remember in middle school, like I had friends that were constantly doodling, and it just seemed so therapeutic, but I couldn't. Like, I would think too much about what I'm doodling, and then it would look like shit anyway, and I'm like, this is... Well, I don't have that gene in me, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not really a good doodler either. It's the athlete in me where I have very high standards. I'm like, and then I shred it up.
So you have like these intense drawings.
But I'm like, that was a phase in my life where I was into this watercolor and I was painting these things, and it was abstract.
That's so cool.
I don't know, but I wanted to share with you too, like just how far we've come to, like from, like I said, handing out bananas and Belvitas to our semi-professional soccer team to where we are now. And I think like our hearts are really with a lot of players associations too. So like we do all of the USL 1 and USL Championship through the Players Association, so they can all reach, all those athletes can reach out to us through soccer, through that Players Association. And then really like have just gotten very big this year, especially. We signed with Inter Miami, and so all of the Inter Miami athletes now can come see us, first team, second team, academy. And they've been really amazing about wanting a external like third party to be able to support their athletes. And that's something that we really push to, is that, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like, instead of walking down the hall and seeing the therapist who has their team's logo on their chest, they're talking to OnRise. It's not like within that organization or who they're getting paid for or paid by, right? Like there's no incentive for us to share anything. Like we are
Yeah.
third party, we're separate. So it's been really cool to see a lot of the organizations who want to go the extra mile, and they don't care to be like, what's going on with blah, blah, blah. They're just like, amazing. These athletes are getting help, right? And they want their athletes truly to get help. We also work with Inter Miami's academy and second team too. We just signed with the Premier League lacrosse team and doing all of the Premier League lacrosse, which is great. Like I mentioned
That's
earlier,
awesome.
the MLSPA for their former athletes. And one of the really exciting ones that I'm personally excited about is the U.S. Women's National Team Players Association too.
No way.
So they can all reach out and get help. And a huge piece, and goes into your podcast a lot, is providing coverage after they leave as well. So with the MLS Players Association, and them providing that coverage to former athletes, like they know they're going through things during that transition, and we try to provide some aftercare for them as well, because we know that not all of the things that happen are happening on the ground, on the field while they're playing. Sometimes the biggest things are happening when they're transitioning out. So just been really cool to see how many athletes' lives that we can impact and help. And I think I know we're almost to about 3,000 athletes that can come see us and get our support within 48 hours of reaching out. So really,
That's amazing.
really amazing.
Well, how can someone reach out to you if they want to get involved or somehow connect with OnRise?
Yeah. We have information on our website, so just putting in a form and the appropriate person can reach out. Right now we're doing like B2B, so organizations who are signing up and then having their athletes be able to utilize us free of charge and paid for by the organization. So really trying to partner and provide services through organizations that then provide free services for their athletes. So
now, what about any former athletes that want to be part of the team to help counsel?
Absolutely. So Derek Furlow is our chief athletic officer, and he does our recruiting for different athletes who have formerly played and want to do this and become a part of this. We have a long list right now of people we have had trained and are in the queue. And as we get more work in, we'll definitely be able to get them placed. And I think really having a range of different people is huge. And we don't let anybody sit aside. We have conversations with everybody who expresses interests, or Derek specifically does, because everybody offers something different, right? It's the person who randomly speaks Portuguese and they did a little bit of German. Like that can relate to somebody. It's somebody who's been through a unique circumstance, through career-ending injuries, that we might want specifically because we're seeing that a lot of athletes want to talk to somebody who's been through some similar injury. So just different experiences and different unique opportunities that they bring to the table. But, we do see this as we expand and we get bigger, that this amazing job for former athletes. And we do it in an independent contractor basis too. So especially for some of those athletes who are going through the transition, maybe they don't want to work for OnRise forever, but for now, like getting a few hours a week and changing and impacting another athlete's life is absolutely beneficial and important for them to be a part of. And we find that almost every single athlete mental health specialist that we've hired, the main thing that they want to do is leave the sports world better than they found it. They want to give back to what they didn't have. They went through a mental health struggle that they went through alone, similar to what you're saying, and they want to be able to help current athletes who are going through that. And they say, I wish I would have had this, right? and now they're able to provide it and make that change and leave the sports world a better place than they found it.
I think you're doing amazing work, and I think the whole organization is going to change a lot of lives.
Thank you. I really
appreciate you. And
I think this podcast is going to be really important and good for other people going through this transition too, because like you said, you don't have to do it alone. And also there are so many people who are in similar circumstances and unique, not necessarily unique. It happens to a lot of us, right? And there are other people who have been through it. There are people who have lost jobs, and it's going to be okay, and you come out through the other side of it. And I think having resources and things to put in your toolkit like this podcast are so important.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it makes a difference.
I do too. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you.